The Reserve Bank will monitor today's wage price index as it considers whether to continue increasing interest rates. Minutes from the May meeting revealed the board believes inflation is still way too high and will be difficult to bring under control because of weak productivity. Relating to that and the previous story, joining me now is the National Secretary of the Transport Workers Union, Michael Kaine. Michael, thank you so much for your time. You are fully aware of the economic environment at the moment. You still want wages to go up. What are you actually wanting across the board here?
Oh, hi, Laura. Look, I think the key thing here to remember is that these workers are essential workers. The cleanaway workers today, the vigil we held yesterday for the truck drivers, the 301 that have died in the last 7 years since the coalition tore down the road safety watchdog. These are essential workers, and there's decades of evidence that show in road transport that if you have poor conditions and poor rates of pay, then there is a safety outcome on our roads. And that is a critical concern. These workers want a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. They want to be able to look after the community as well, as they did throughout the COVID crisis.
Okay, well, you blame the previous coalition government, but you've got wall-to-wall Labor governments now on the mainland. What's being done about it?
Well, that's a very good point. I mean, we do have Labor governments now, and the Labor governments across the board have committed to doing what is possible to put fairness back in play and to put safety back in play. There is a real need for national transport legislation, and there's a promise from the federal government to table such legislation sometime this year. And we'll be continuing our campaign, as we did in our vigil yesterday, to get the federal parliament as a whole, as soon as that legislation comes forward, to endorse it, because what we need is to ensure that these massive supply chain pressures, those at the top of the supply chains that are reaping the economic benefit, are held to account so that workers can be paid properly.
Sure. At the same time, I mean, that's 2 years into Anthony Albanese's term, really, by the end of this year, or almost 2 years that he'll be even tabling this legislation. It doesn't seem like a priority. At the same time, Michael, you would have seen in this budget, we've just seen an increase in the heavy vehicle road user charge.
Yeah, look, it's really interesting. I mean, it's only just a year since, it seems like 2 years, but it's only just a year since Anthony Albanese was elected. And of course, the commitment from the federal government about road transport was made out of the Jobs Summit, which was only a few months after the election. So yes, it is urgent. And you are right, Laura, for every day that passes, we lose more Australians. 1,252 Australians have been killed in truck crashes since the road safety watchdog was torn down. And yes, it is urgent, and it needs to be done as quickly as possible.
Okay, but my point was, you know, if they're not doing it now, they're saying they'll table it by the end of the year. That means it might not be voted into next year. That's 2 years since they were elected. But also this budget, if you could address this, you've just made the direct link between wages and conditions and deaths of truck drivers on the road. How do you stomach then the increase in the heavy vehicle road user charge?
Well, it's very difficult to stomach, but what we are given hope about is, of course, the new system that is to come into place. Road user charges ultimately hit transport operators and transport drivers unequally. It really should be those that are reaping the economic benefit that pay these road user charges, the major clients in the industry, the miners, the retailers. And if
but that's all got a knock-on effect, right? And, you know, there's a lot of owner-driver truck drivers, and the day after the budget, I don't know whether you noticed, but at least in Sydney, Talkback Radio was absolutely going nuts about this. This is the one thing that truck drivers say is just piling on their costs as well as tolls.
And that's why we need this tribunal in place. If we had the road safety watchdog in place, what we would have done is immediately made an application to that watchdog to ensure that the road user charges could be recovered from those that are reaping the economic benefit. So the damage that's been done by the removal of that watchdog is absolutely massive. And yes, it is urgent to get it back in place, because at the end of the day, transport operators are price takers in this industry. And of course, they are in the position, if they're not getting enough money from the top of the supply chain, where they have to squeeze the drivers that do the task. And that is deadly. It's been shown to be deadly. 1,252 Australians dead in the last 7 years, 301 of them truck drivers, and we do need change.
Overall, you're pretty happy with this government so far, what they're delivering?
Well, I think the atmosphere of government has changed and the approach has changed. That is, what we're seeing here is a people-focused approach. And of course, from our perspective, a worker-focused approach. Now, not everything can be done with the click of a fingers. We've had 30 years of a very different approach, a kind of trickle-down approach, which says that workers will be taken care of so long as you take care of the top end of town. That clearly failed. And the Albanese government, I think, is doing a very good job in this respect. They're taking their time, they have a focus, and they're systematically working their way through the issues. And we're doing that with them. But this is very, very urgent.